I'm really, really worried that if we don't have changes, we are going to be going further down the ossification route that we're already heading there. And Bitcoin will turn out to be yet another asset, a Rolex for rich people. Right now, you're heading straight to BlackRock.
Ellie, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
This is our first time meeting,
Indeed.
Which is a treat for me.
Likewise.
I'd love to just give a little context of sort of the show and sort of what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
So my background is in Bitcoin communications, and I've been focused exclusively on Bitcoin for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And then after Ordinals happened, and then BitVM, and then OpCat, and all of these things, I'm finding myself needing to catch up on the influence and, potential use of zero-knowledge proofs and validity proofs for scaling Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So, in my research, obviously, you have come up as sort of the godfather of this idea of using zero-knowledge proofs for scaling.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm just really excited to sort of dig into kind of the relevant history there, start with like a little bit of your background and kind of get into kind of what's happening more modern history with this idea of using zero knowledge proofs for scaling Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So I often describe my story as, a mathematician walks into a Bitcoin conference, which isn't a joke. This is what happened to me. So in 2013, I was a professor of theoretical computer science, and I was doing mostly math research. But by then, I've been involved for like 5 years in implementing some of that research into like actual code. And I was peddling my research mostly in academic institutions,
What year was this roughly?
2013.
2013.
It was May 2013.
Okay.
Exactly a dozen years ago.
Okay.
Almost to the day. And I knew I had to give a talk in Stanford, and I heard that there's a Bitcoin conference in San Jose. So I reached out to the organizers and I asked to present this academic mathematical research there.
Was there a reason, not to interrupt, but was there a reason you wanted to go to a Bitcoin conference specifically to present this research?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when academics present their math results, they usually, especially computer scientists, you start by giving motivation, like, why am I doing this? And because I was implementing certain algorithms, it was even more important that I say, what is the practical motivation? Who might use it? And as I was thinking about examples that this technology could be used, it was very hard to find good examples. And I happened to hear about Bitcoin again around that time. And I thought, this might be a good thing to put in the talk. So it started with that. It was one of 3 examples as to why my research could be, what is the motivation? The other 2 examples were gaming, but in the conventional gaming, not blockchain gaming setting. And the third was like, monitoring of key infrastructure, like, nuclear reactors and stuff like that. So I had these 3 examples. So I already thought that Bitcoin might be a good example. And then I heard about this Bitcoin conference. So I said, why don't I try and present it there? I went there. It was the most electrifying conference I ever attended.
I bet.
I mean, maybe now this conference in Vegas that
David Bailey might outdo it.
Yeah, might outdo it. But for me, the first time, like first love is always like, you remember it. So it was really amazing, just the electricity in the air. And it was like so interesting to see, especially coming from the academic conference tours where things are much more sanguine and like, sort of...
Boring.
I didn't want to say boring, but like, okay. So it was very lively. And then what happened was, inspired by that, I completely gutted the presentation I had and rewrote one that was just for Bitcoin. And as I left the podium, it wasn't a well-attended talk. Only very few people attended it. But among those who attended were, Greg Maxwell and Mike Hearn and a few other core devs.
Amazing.
So they came up. I remember Greg Maxwell coming up and saying, okay, when's the code ready? And I said, why do you care when the code is ready? He says, here are like 3 things I would like to do with it tomorrow. And indeed, he started posting the very same day or the next day about like all kinds of like conditional transactions and contingent payments. And I just felt in my heart that there's something here very unique, because all the other places I was presenting this research, no one cared. And many years later, I can now articulate why is it that this technology is so relevant to blockchain or to Bitcoin. But back then I only felt it.
And just for clarity, is the technology that you're referencing, were these validity proofs or some sort of early stage validity proofs? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
It was validity proofs. And actually most of the focus wasn't on the privacy aspect, the ZK, but rather on scaling. And as you said, yes, I'm very proud to say I was the first person to say to the world at the Bitcoin conference, look guys, there's this technology that can help scale blockchains under the same principles that blockchain operates under.
Okay, so Greg Maxwell immediately wanted to use this specifically for scaling, but did that conversation go anywhere immediately in terms of implementation? How was that all at the time?
So the discussion did go on, but it wasn't implemented on Bitcoin. The next big step was that we actually used the ZK aspect of the core technology to present a way to make Bitcoin completely private, meaning you can shield payer, recipient, and the amount being paid. And the academic paper was called Zcash.
That's right.
And then Zuko and his team reached out. This was around 2015. And we agreed to co-found the electric coin company. This was in 2015, and deploy it as Zcash. So Zcash was the next thing. And Zcash actually used this set of technologies. In that particular case, it was a ZK SNARK based on elliptic curves. I don't want to confuse some other version of cryptography that has very, very short proofs, but is susceptible to quantum attacks like quantum computers and stuff like that. So it's a certain kind of
proof that was susceptible to quantum attacks?
Yes, this still is. So it's okay, they're within the world of ZK deployed today on blockchains, the two big terms that are used are either SNARKs or STARKs.
Right.
And SNARKs are what we deployed first on Zcash.
Okay.
And
SNARKs were first. SNARKs with an N were first.
Yeah, SNARKs were first deployed in Zcash and made their way into Ethereum, Tornado Cash, and stuff like that. And they're still, used and available. And I hope that someday we can have that construction also on Bitcoin, which will bring us to things like Opcat. And so that was 2015.
Okay. And I want to kind of get into a little bit of the unlock of SNARKs specifically, because my understanding is they're very critical for specifically the blockchain use case for validity proofs. But just to circle back 1 second. So was the reason why the scaling conversation didn't work because you would need some sort of soft fork or kind of opcode? Is that basically got stopped at that point?
Yeah, it's been,
that's been the case for
past a dozen years. And I'm hopeful that it could get unstuck, because I have no doubt that, Satoshi, so Zuko spoke about this a bunch of times, that actually Satoshi, when he was still corresponding, he did mention ZK, and he was, positive and encouraging about them. When he was, by the time they became practical after he sort of dropped off the radar. But I have no doubt that Satoshi would very much approve of, having, in particular, ZK STARKs, which are post-quantum secure, have no trusted setup, or as safe as Bitcoin, deployed as soon as possible on Bitcoin. I have no doubt.
Satoshi thought that this was a possibility for scaling, we might have this opcode.
Oh, I have no doubt. You see, because you see, when Satoshi was active, he was actually very quick to implement and then remove and add and tweak the system a little bit around.
Add and then remove Opcat itself.
Yeah, but yes, and I think he added a lot of opcodes, and indeed removed a lot of them. There was indeed some, obvious security attack that he wanted to prevent
with Opcat specifically.
With Opcat, but here's my speculation: he dropped off the radar for physical reasons. I think he's either unfortunately dead or unavailable. It's not like he's decided he's not. If he's still alive, or she, and I'm not sure he or she is. probably cannot communicate for like physical, health reasons. But my interpretation of, watching the history of the way he or she did correspond is that they probably would have been very quick to add back and fix things and so on. And, now, unfortunately, it's been almost 4 years since the last soft fork. And I'm like really worried, like, will we ever be able to offer, the kind of scale and privacy and post-quantum security that is afforded by ZK Starks on Bitcoin? I mean, I'm hopeful, but
I think quantum and scaling are both the areas where we theoretically will need a soft fork at some point, which we'll kind of get into whether or not that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's circle back. So Zcash.
Yes.
So Zcash is sort of the next leg of this.
Yes.
But Zcash was specifically focused on privacy, not scaling.
Exactly.
Scaling
Totally on
conversation was
privacy.
on pause.
Yes.
And then we moved to a privacy conversation.
Yes.
How was Zcash? I mean,
Amazing. I love it. I still love it. Yeah.
How long were you, and you were working with this company as well?
We were sort of, so we were 7 co-authors on the academic paper. We were all founding scientists. We had, we supported help with the technology transfer of explaining what's going on. But all of the credit of building it out, productizing and shipping it is due to the, the amazing electric coin company, which we're not, I wasn't an employee of. And
okay. So you worked with the electric coin company.
Worked with them. I saw them, I saw Zuko's brilliant leadership and inspiration and vision, and learned a lot from it. And yeah, they delivered on it in a very short time. And I think it's an amazing, system in blockchain. And
how would you compare, not to ask an ignorant question, but how would you compare Zcash to something like Monero? Like, were these two core competitors in your view?
They try to address privacy, but Zcash actually solves it. And Monero, you don't really have that good a set of privacy on Monero.
Okay.
You have these mixing things that are randomized, but there are many very simple ways to de-anonymize it.
And probabilistic ways to kind of solve for who is.
Yeah, very relatively easy. Yes, you don't get much of a, something that sort of protects you on Monero.
Little bit of a spicy question, but we won't stay on it too long. So Monero got quite a bit of adoption, like relatively speaking, got like quite a bit of adoption. There's like kind of like a Monero kind of cult. Do you just sort of chalk that up to like marketing versus Zcash?
I don't know. Could be.
So the other question I was going to ask you about Zcash before we move on from Zcash is like, in your heart, what is your favorite use case for zero knowledge proofs? Is your end game scaling? Okay, scaling.
But to me, scaling and privacy, they are both very much needed.
Yes.
To me, the actual end game is both of them.
Right.
You must have both.
And if you use ZKPs for scaling, you get the privacy benefits as just sort of like part of the deal. Depending.
Yes and no. Privacy, getting the technology to provide zero knowledge proofs is no more challenging than getting it to offer you scale. What is challenging is privacy, because you have to build the whole system differently in order to support true privacy.
Right.
Just putting the proofs would be a little bit like putting, a very strong lock on something that has windows all around.
Right.
So you need all of this extra stuff.
Right. The proof is just one little piece of like the whole broader user experience.
Exactly. To make sure that you get good user experience, but also good privacy. That's the hard part.
So how long were you focused on Zcash before, actually, I won't even say before Starkware, I'll say before the explosion of zero knowledge proof interest on Ethereum? I mean, can you tell me a little bit about that era? I was not there. So when did the zero knowledge proof era begin on Ethereum?
Yeah, so I was there from the start because a lot of it exploded because of what Starkware did. So what happened was in 2018 we had a bunch of a few more math breakthroughs that we realized that we can now really bring scaling in a way that is post-quantum secure and very, very efficient. And we called it ZK Starks. So this was 2018.
And this was happening, was the initial use case for this Zcash? Like, was this part of your...
This was for scaling.
Research.
This was separate research. It's based on a different set of technologies, which is why it's post-quantum secure, doesn't have any trusted setup, the kind of things that are very important in the context of Bitcoin, but also generally. And I decided to take a leave of absence from my academic institution, stop my research and go co-found a company. I think the biggest driver to that was, well, first of all, the technology, but the other part was the team. I had I still have this very close friend who was my main co-founder, Uri Kolodny, and a seasoned, serial entrepreneur. And I managed to convince him to come along. And
he was not a cryptographer. He was like a businessman.
He was a businessman, with a lot of experience in startups previously in the medical space and databases, but a very close friend of mine. And he said, yeah, let's do this together. So I felt comfortable enough, leaving my academic position and basically jumping head into this. And this was early 2018. So we're talking about 7 years ago. Now, we started developing the technology and we said, as my Twitter handle says till this day, I'm a ZK Stark maxi. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I'm not an Ethereum maxi. I'm not anything maxi. I'm a maxi of this technology. And I want to see it deployed everywhere. I have no doubt it will be deployed everywhere. On Bitcoin, on all blockchains. It will be used in the conventional banking system. It's a really important technology.
Not just for blockchain. So the unlock of Starks is not blockchain specific.
Not just for blockchain. It gives you privacy and it really gives you the ability to prove your integrity with no trust assumptions.
What was the distinction between Starks and your previous implementations of zero-knowledge proofs? Like, what is unique about Starks?
Okay, what is unique about Starks is that they use a lot more math to make things far more secure and efficient. So you use a lot more math, but in return, you get rid of the stuff that makes quantum computers break it. You don't need a trusted setup. You don't need this sort of setting up of keys. There's no hidden trap door that could be used or compromised. You can even let a nation state use such a system and deploy it, and the nation state cannot be able to, cheat or lie if it's using such a proof system. So it's very powerful, and it has 3 to 5 orders of magnitude more scale than the previous systems.
Not to get too nerdy, but was there like a particular math breakthrough that happened?
Yeah, a bunch of them.
A bunch of them.
Yeah, a bunch
Several of them.
Yeah.
This was a long-term project.
Yeah, IOPs and FRI, which stands for Fast Reed Solomon IOP of Proximity, and the ZK Stark white paper. So there were a bunch of things called AIRs, arithmetic, algebraic intermediate representations, and a whole bunch of other very nerdy, very math terms.
And all of these different math breakthroughs were basically being used to sort of fill certain security holes in the previous.
Yes. They were exactly to make sure that you don't need to use large numbers.
Make sure quantum secure, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Okay. All of that stuff.
Each little hole was filled, and then you kind of came to this beautiful Stark.
Yep. And was at the time that Game of Thrones was very popular.
Oh, yes.
But then I learned later, Zuko actually told us that Stark is also related to Tony Stark.
Oh, yeah.
And there's, right, in the Marvelverse, there's Stark Industries.
Very powerful name.
Now, unrelatedly, the name of the company we founded is called Starkware Industries.
Perfect. So all of the naming kind of just worked out in your favor.
Yeah.
And so you started Starkware because you had this sort of discovery, for lack of a better word, of Starks.
Yes.
And would you say that that's what spurred on the zero-knowledge proof Ethereum explosion?
Yes.
Okay.
So the way it happened was, Vitalik was basically our very first investor.
Okay.
I've always been on good terms with him, ever since he was. So I met him first when he was a Bitcoin magazine editor, and he flew over to Israel and interviewed me we sat over hummus, and we discussed ZK and what it could do. This was before the yellow paper came out of Ethereum.
This was 2015 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I think around that time, or 2014. I don't remember exactly. And so he was our first, angel investor for Starkware. And then a bunch of others came along. And the Ethereum Foundation and the Ethereum. So, okay, we wanted to deploy this on any possible chain. I still would like it to be deployed on any possible blockchain, as I said, outside of even blockchain in general. But, you can only focus on one thing at a time. So unfortunately, back then, and even today, Bitcoin doesn't support yet the full deployment of the necessary ingredients to have
You need an opcode, basically.
Exactly. You need an opcode. Opcat would suffice barely. You probably need a little bit more to make it really efficient and fast. Ethereum was the second largest, still is, and it could support us deploying there. So we deployed there. And what happened was that slowly, by basically demonstrating the success of our technology by saving over $1 billion in user fees on the systems that we operated, trading over $1 trillion of volume on them, and minting over 100 million NFTs at a very low cost, we convinced the world that this kind of validity technology is the way to scale.
This is the future of scaling.
This is the future of scaling on blockchains. Yes. So I think to a large degree, the fact that everyone is saying today ZK is the end game is the result of the work of Starkware.
So what was there? I mean, was the kind of cryptographic academic circles impacted by this? I mean, what do you think of the impacts of all this venture capital money coming into interest in zero knowledge proofs? I mean, what was that?
It's funny. It's so, you know what? Now, 7 years after Starkware was founded, I think the academic world is sort of appreciating, starting to appreciate. I just gave an invited talk at Eurocrypt, which is a big academic cryptographic conference. I'll give another one in Stock, which is a major theoretical computer science conference. But it's been 7 years since Starkware sort of came around. I guess the academic world, it pursues other things. So
they're not into blockchains, basically.
They're not enough. Well, it did take them a while to realize that this is interesting as a story that did originate from that area of math.
Well, and it just seems to me like you have millions and millions of dollars being put into a certain kind of cryptographic research.
Yeah.
How could you in academia not take note of that? Would be my assumption.
That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah. Well, I mean, we did move into business and I wasn't as active in academic circles, but I think this story is being more widely embraced in the academic circles of this theory that I should, of course, note that it's not that I invented everything. I'm how do you say, a dwarf on the shoulder of giants. This has been many decades of research. So this whole thrust of theory, the fact that now it's being used and transforming the world is something that the academic world that I came from is now starting to appreciate and celebrate.
I assume competitors like other, blockchains and other technologists wanted to use this
of course.
And potentially were reaching out to folks in academic circles, et cetera. Was there an explosion basically?
It's ongoing. Yeah, there are many.
Ongoing.
Yeah, and they're in a certain way, I feel they're all my children. So I'm very proud of
all of them.
Yeah, of course. The set of technologies that we set forth to, we invented and set forth to commercialize. Now, pretty much almost all the teams working on ZK for scaling have embraced. And, many of them are competitors. That's fine. But I feel very proud to see that
it's good competition.
It's good competition and healthy. And at the end of the day, what matters is, advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. So
and security,
Yeah. So even if we have more competition, and even if I don't think it will be the case, but even if some other player will, win the jackpot on this thing, I will still, be very happy with my contribution to that thrust.
When did Starknet go live? And there's been a couple iterations, right? There was StarkX and it turned into Starknet. How did that work? Yeah.
So StarkX was the first product, and it was a product built on Ethereum, helping it to scale And it was saving, this is the system which basically I think demonstrated more than anything else the power of ZK Starks. So there were a lot of decentralized exchanges operating on top of it, teams that are in the gaming space that used it to mint NFTs. And the system went live in 2020, so like 5 years ago.
A while ago.
Yeah, it's been humming ever since. As I said, more than $1 trillion of volume settled on it, all safely and security without any glitches till this day. Yeah. And then in 2022, I believe, we decided that we need, instead of having just one system that we fully built and operate, we want to have something that is a full-blown, decentralized, anyone can deploy, anyone can write code, anyone can operate system, and that is Starknet, which is a layer 2 on Ethereum, now on Bitcoin as well. So we're going to be
kind of sort of defined the term L2 for Ethereum. Like when I think about like L2 beat, for instance, which is referenced all the time, I think like you guys are one of the few that sort of satisfy this criteria potentially, or are there still like holes in this definition? How do you think about what an L2 really is?
So an L2 is something whose security is ultimately pegged on the security of some other chain, right? Which is the layer 1.
That's a very clean way to say it.
Yeah. So what this translates into, it means that we cannot transition into the system into a new state unless the L1 runs a ZK Stark verifier that checks that we operated with integrity. Mm-hmm. So the layer 2 is sort of bound by the security of the layer 1 and of course the security of math.
And StarkX would satisfy this definition?
Yes, it was a layer 2 as well. It still is a layer 2.
Possibly the first on Ethereum that really satisfied that definition?
Yeah, I mean, there was another very good one, still is, called Loopring. I don't think it's operational anymore, but I think it may have been before us. So I'm not sure we were the very first to satisfy that definition, but certainly among the first and by far like the largest in terms of a lot of metrics and usage.
Okay. So Starknet, when did Starknet, is Starknet officially, it is live now, right?
It is live, yeah.
When did that happen?
I believe, I think 22, it went live. So it's been out there for a while.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you guys are effectively building an ecosystem on Starknet.
Yeah.
Is that the primary commercial goal at this point, is to get application developers, et cetera, do that whole ecosystem building game?
Yeah, exactly. The commercial goal is to get as much usage and as much, to offer as much value to end users on blockchain. And in particular, I'm very proud of the achievement so far. For instance, there's an application called Focustree that I use, my kids use, we use to sort of it's like when you want to focus, like you're studying for an exam or something. So you sort of press a button there and it bars everything on your smartphone. And then you create some garden that you can show to your friends and you're all competing to do it. That whole thing is deployed on Starknet. It has more than 200,000 monthly active users. I'm pretty certain that none of them even know that it is a blockchain application.
Well, that's the best.
Right.
Exactly.
And they're bringing their life, they have true ownership of this aspect of their life because it is on a blockchain. It is not on some database of some system.
So they accrue some value. I was going to say, where does the blockchain come into play? They accrue some value by using this application?
Well, the value they accrue is that they are now focusing and sort of encouraging each other. It's like this Strava, this sort of, what's it called? This health application or this sports application where you sort of brag to your friends about your achievements. So it's like that.
But why do you need a blockchain specifically for that use case?
So their vision, which I agree with, is that this is part of your reputation, right? Your ability to focus and to, let's say, compete with your friends on this. This is part of your reputation. I think what they want to do is tie it to other things that will be part of your identity.
So it's like social credit system.
Yes, exactly. And this should be truly yours, right? It shouldn't be on the database of some company. This should be yours in the truest sense, in a self-custodial way, so that even if the company shuts down, it's yours. And when you want to prove that you have this credential, you don't have to ask, some other authority to give you this approval. It is yours.
Okay, so basically from 2020 to let's call it 2024, which I feel like is like the postmodern era that we're going to get into, you're really focused on developing applications and getting developers to build on StarkX, Starknet in the Ethereum ecosystem primarily, for the crypto broader ecosystem.
That's true.
When did you start to think maybe we could do something on Bitcoin? Like, what was your experience of arriving at Bitcoin season 2?
Okay, so what happened was, I think it really is a Taproot and the change that came that made us a little bit more optimistic that there might be in the future a way to verify and place our technology as it should on Bitcoin. So
what specifically about Taproot were you most excited? Like, what was the unlock about Taproot that you thought, okay, this could potentially lead to XYZ?
Okay, I think our thinking was something like this. First of all, the fact that it actually deployed. Okay, so like that the Bitcoin community can embrace a soft fork that offers new functionality. And second was the whole class of assets that then deployed and showed, I guess, two things. One, that I mean things like, ordinals and BRC20s and runes and inscriptions that basically showed, well, two things. First of all, that there's huge demand to do more economic activity and social activity on Bitcoin. That was number one that it demonstrated. And number two was that there is a possibility to start doing things even before CAT arrives and so on. So like you could operate on Bitcoin using things like inscriptions and runes and ordinals.
Were you optimistic about Taproot pre-ordinals? Because I mean, there was a period of, at least a couple years after Taproot was activated before ordinals came onto the scene. I mean, when Taproot was first activated, did you think, oh, this is interesting, this could...
No, I wasn't following.
You didn't? Okay, yeah. So it wasn't really until ordinals happened.
You're right, yes.
Okay.
Right. When ordinals happened,
okay.
And like we saw this flurry of activity, there was a realization that, maybe you might get things like layer 2s onto Bitcoin. You might actually scale it
Was that
natively.
Because of ordinals being used kind of as a DA layer? Was that sort of the thing that kind of spurred you to think about layer 2s?
The fact that there was activity around it and there was excitement and developers were coming and people were talking about this. So
just Bitcoin Renaissance vibes. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. It showed that there is maybe a path where Bitcoin wants even more. And I think that the best way for Bitcoin to have more economic activity that is done in the Bitcoin way under the same Bitcoin principles is to have layer 2s that rely on Bitcoin as their security layer, but offer a lot more expressibility, good UX, lower costs, higher scale.
All right, guys, I want to take a quick break to thank you for watching and remind you to click the follow button on my profile if you'd like more Bitcoin technical deep dives like this. I also want to give a shout out to my partners for making the show possible. Best in Slot and Unisat are, of course, co-maintainers of the BRC20 protocol. They are working on some incredible updates to BRC20, including the BRC20 programmability module designed by Best in Slot, which is currently in testnet. This will make execution of smart contracts for BRC20 possible at the indexer level, which is about as trustless and Bitcoin native as it gets. Unisat is also working on a single-step transfer function for BRC20, which I know many of you will be excited about. That's been widely requested by the BRC20 community. And last but not least, my incredible Layer 2 partner, Citria, who I couldn't be more excited about teaming up with. Citria is working on one of the leading implementations of a BitVM zero-knowledge proof style bridge, an execution environment for Bitcoin. So they're essentially building what I think could become the canonical Bitcoin roll-up. And they have an absolutely incredible team of people backing them up and getting really creative about how to push this technology forward. So my opinion, once we have a truly trust minimized bridge, anything is possible for Bitcoin. So I'm very grateful to Citria for their work and for supporting the show. Let's get back to it. So when you would say when ordinals happened, it wasn't like, oh, all of a sudden we have a new technical path to making L2s happen on Bitcoin, so much as there was now just renewed interest in
and a
what
glimmer
Bitcoin
of a hope
could be.
Yes, a glimmer of a hope that maybe things will get there.
And do you think that that was more of a cultural shift then? At that time, we're talking like pre-Opcat. It was
probably.
a cultural
Yes,
shift.
yes.
Okay, so now there's this new interest.
Yes.
So then what happens next on the journey? Because in my mind, I was there. So my background is I helped Casey with the comms for the ordinals launch.
Amazing.
That was how I got launched into this.
So you got me back into...
I mean, I would never in a million years take credit for that.
Yeah.
But
why not?
I got a front row view of this journey, right? And I remember after ordinals happened, it took a little while for people to really start talking about L2s. I mean, it's not necessarily obvious that because ordinals exist, all of a sudden we're now going to have the technical prowess to create these sort of trust minimized bridges and things like that. So you would say that was just sort of, it started with the sort of cultural, maybe there's something here.
Yes.
And then was it, at what point in the history we were thinking, oh, technically we may actually be able to get here as well?
Nothing has changed materially. And if anything, I think that now I'm slightly less optimistic on CAT being activated soon. I'm hopeful that at least some soft fork is done.
But the CAT conversation was a piece of this.
Oh yeah. The CAT conversation was a huge piece of it. And, we said,
How did that come up? Because my impression, and I don't know, and I'm curious to ask you of all people how this went down, right? My experience of the OpCat conversation is you have Udi and Eric and the wizards who are, ordinal maxis, basically. Yes. And all of the sudden, they hire Reindal and they're, all of a sudden building this sort of like mysterious L2 technology and they're advocating for this new opcode, OpCat.
Yes.
And it's a little, mysterious how that all kind of played out, other than being just sort of like a idea or fantasy of Udi and Eric's. I imagine you got more of a front row seat to that conversation than I did. How did that all happen?
So I saw glimpses of, certain parts of it. I think I was, anyways.
Do you remember the first conversation you had about, was it Eric who kind of talked to you about this? How did you first hear about maybe OpCat's actually going to be activated? This is a conversation that's resurging. What was that experience?
I remember, I think when the very first cats came out, like the JPEGs and whatnot. So actually...
The JPEGs came first.
Yeah. So I actually was at dinner with Eric, and I remember, as they were coming out, and, was interesting to watch that whole... thing come out and all of the excitement.
But he must have said, we're doing cats because we're interested in promoting this up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That has been their vision, and they're very, very... so I like them a lot, and I think that they're net positive contribution to the space. I know that some people within Bitcoin, have varying opinions on them. I know both of them very well, and I think... very highly of them. Behind the...
Ditto, by the way.
What? Yeah. Behind the wizard cloaks and the trolling and whatever it is, they're very serious and very smart. And and actually they, in my view, have very, very good intentions in mind. I think the sort of the more social aspects that they're very good at are not the essence. They are the means to the end. The end is actually advancing what Bitcoin is. I have no doubt about it. I know it. That's what they really want. They don't want the the funky NFTs or that thing. That is a means to an end to them. And I agree with the end. Bitcoin should do more than it is doing right now.
Did you have any conversations with them about, why they chose OpCat specifically to promote versus like a CTV or another?
Yeah, of course, a lot.
What were those conversations like?
Very simple. I think and I agree with them, it was a very pragmatic sort of trying as best possible within this very strange lack of governance system called Bitcoin, what is the way to best scale Bitcoin that would be, the minimal path of resistance that would actually improve things? And
CTV was too controversial maybe at that time.
CTV just doesn't deliver enough. It just doesn't, it improves. Look, I love Lightning. I think Lightning is great, but let's face it, the world will not, you cannot scale global payments with Lightning technology.
Agreed.
You cannot.
Yeah.
So I love Lightning. I support it. I would like it to be as, widely used as possible. We actually have integrated Lightning into Starknet. You can do payments from Starknet directly to Bitcoin on Lightning. We love everything about it. And which is why I support CTV and CSFS. They will improve things for Lightning. But that's not enough.
Could you not also use them to bridge into other execution environments? Or you think they're really
not. You really want covenants, and CAT and CSFS don't give you that. You really need that. You need the ability to do more. So I don't think Lightning will ever be, a global means of payment, unfortunately.
Yeah. At what point in the OpCat conversation did you think, okay, Starkware as a company should be focusing on this? Or was the OpCat conversation not relevant in that decision?
So folks within my team, I'll share a secret with you. As CEO, I get too much credit for stuff that I think my role as CEO is to listen to the much smarter people on our team, and then
snaps for that.
Okay, and then repeat some of the things I hear, and just encourage. Oh, you know what? That's interesting. Let's do more. So there, I think the original, urgent drive came from a very brilliant guy on our team, Louis Gutmann, who said, "Look, CAT is now happening," and he even had a bet with Uri, who my co-founder was the first CEO. About and I also had a bet about when CAT will be activated, and we both lost our bets about when will Starks be on Bitcoin.
What were the original speculations? I mean, were you guys thinking, this is going to be activated in 6 months?
Well, my bet with Uli was I think one person has to buy the other dinner if within 5 years of that date.
Wow.
I think it was a year ago.
Time.
No. Sorry, we set this. We set this bet 6 years ago.
Oh,
so 1 year.
CAT specifically?
Not for CAT, just Starks.
Software. Okay.
Starks on Bitcoin.
Oh God. Oh, interesting.
And then I had an argument because actually a very brilliant researcher, Wei King Chen, showed that you can actually settle a Stark on Signet with OpCat. So I was trying to argue that maybe, I could say that Starks have already deployed on Bitcoin.
Justify your
yeah, but I owe him a dinner.
Yeah.
So I lost. So anyway, Louis Gutmann came and said he had a lot of brilliant ideas, but he came and said, guys, we really need to do more on this. And then Aviu, our CPO, co-author of ColliderScript and Collider VM, a very, very brilliant researcher, said, this time it's for real. We can actually, there's stuff we can do. And the more I heard about it, the more, as I said, I just regurgitate. I just said, guys, we should do more and more in this direction. So we sort of shifted and are shifting even more with time.
How did that shift go? What were the initial activations for Starkware and the direction of going to Bitcoin and how they've evolved?
So first we started with a little bit of research and just told our team, let's just put more resources on this and think more about it. Then we reached out to Dan Held, who's an advisor to us on this matter. And we said, let's talk about narrative and navigating the field and how can we talk about this? Because it's very important to get the word out there. And he helped us tremendously in crafting the narrative, which talks about Starknet as the first L2 squared, which means settling both on Ethereum and Bitcoin. And what
Dan.
he's amazing.
Dan's great.
Yeah. And Then we started reaching out to a whole bunch of teams who share a similar vision and started integrating with them. So by now we already have deployed, we have, as I said, bridges that automatically let you, through atomic swaps, pay on the Lightning Network. We have today, I think it's today or maybe tomorrow. So I guess by the time this is aired, this will be already public knowledge.
For sure.
Okay. Jeremy Rubin and the Char team is announcing the Runes bridge to Starknet.
I did hear about this.
Okay.
I love Jeremy. I'm a big Jeremy fan.
Likewise. And we will actually be enabling the deployment of all kinds of ERC20 assets and Ethereum and a bunch of things and stables on Bitcoin in the form of runes and inscriptions. So we're going to use the bridge to sort of allow stables.
Like kind of wrapping on both sides, basically?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're going to have runes on Ethereum and you'll have ERC20 tokens on Bitcoin.
Bringing them together. So the first time people will be able, let's say on Magic Eden, to trade and have access to USDC, USDT on Bitcoin, to Ethereum if they so choose, to a whole bunch of...
buy ordinals with USDT, or you could buy runes with USDT.
Yes.
Wow.
Stuff like that and trade them.
When is that? I mean, we don't know. Is there a date on when it goes live? Oh,
I think tomorrow.
Oh, it'll go live tomorrow.
Yes, live tomorrow.
Oh,
yeah, the announcement
and
live.
To meet Kara, who I believe is the CEO of this project.
Yeah.
She is lovely as well.
Yeah. So this is coming like, this week.
Wow.
By the time this airs, this will already be out there.
Will this be Magic Eden integrated pretty quickly, I imagine?
I'm not sure. I'm guessing because it will just be, one of the
It'll be an obvious
standards.
thing to do.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so exciting. Okay.
And then we have Lombard, and basically we'll be offering both BTC staking, meaning that you can... Okay, Starknet is a proof of stake system, which means there is already a staking protocol that generates return in the form of staking rewards in STRK, which is the Starknet token. And we want to expand the set of operators to also stakers of Bitcoin. So folks staking Bitcoin will be able to generate Bitcoin yield by staking on Starknet. Lombard is deploying also Lombard BTC onto Starknet. And again, people will be able to generate yield. And further down the line, because we have a very evolved financial, infrastructure on Bitcoin, things like very good automatic market makers and perps and stuff like that, I'm expecting that more and more Bitcoin activity will spawn on Starknet.
Well, I was going to say, so this is sort of what I'm observing as like a casual participant in this community, is that Starknet seems to be making traditional investments and also grant investments in sort of just getting the Bitcoin native assets, developers and applications onto Starknet. I mean, is that priority number one, or is something else? Yeah, that's a big one.
The first priority is to bring basically Bitcoin assets onto Starknet.
Starknet.
Yeah. Okay. Things like runes, inscriptions, BRC20s.
Get them traded on Starknet. So basically make Starknet like the L2 for Bitcoin native assets.
Yes, exactly.
That
should be the L2 because it is the safest, has been running the longest time, has the strongest technology.
I will say I think that you guys are very, very well positioned. And I think for a couple of reasons. I mean, I think one, you have this really good combination of strong tech, but also really strong BD, I'm noticing, and really, really strong kind of commercial savvy in a way where a lot of your competitors, again, this is my observation, have one of the other, but not both. So
that you may be right. I'll accept the compliment.
Accept the compliment.
Okay.
Except that I've done my research on that one.
Thank you.
So I think that this is all very exciting that Starknet is sort of, again, commercially taking on Bitcoin in this way, and particularly Bitcoin native assets. I think that's really fun and great. I'm obviously a huge fan of the space and participant. I do want to really quickly circle back while we still have time and talk a little bit about the tech. So you said earlier in the interview that OpCat is barely enough to create a real L2 for Bitcoin.
Yes.
We've got this sort of goal of get Bitcoin native assets onto Starknet, but I imagine the real goal is to create a real Bitcoin L2.
Definitely.
And do you think OpCat will cut it?
OpCat will cut it, barely so, meaning that each time we settle and supply a new Stark proof, which again is needed for it to be a true L2, right? For you to have the full security of Bitcoin for your assets, that will be pretty expensive, which means that either we will have to settle rarely, once every few hours, or like if demand comes up, we'll do it more.
It will be expensive just because the math is clunky. It's just like a lot of compute to get these things done.
No, it's actually very, very little compute. You have to verify one Stark. I can tell you what you need to do. First of all, you can probably verify a Stark in less than 10 milliseconds on your smartphone within the browser.
Okay.
Yeah. And what your smartphone will be doing when it's verifying a Stark, it will check about, let's say, 1,000 hashes, like SHA-2 hashes, which is something that, you constantly do.
Yeah.
And then it will do, let's say, another 1,000 what's called modular addition and multiplication. So it means, you add two numbers or you multiply them, but you take the remainder from a certain small number, a 32-bit number. So you're doing like addition and then you take the remainder from this small number. So it's a very fast operation.
Okay.
The issue is that the script model with its stack is extremely limited.
Right.
So for it to verify a Stark proof,
right,
that takes a lot of time.
So it's clunky. It's not clunky in the world, but it's clunky on Bitcoin. It's clunky on Bitcoin.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if you add a few other opcodes, for instance, I was talking with Adam Back some time ago, and he said, why don't we try to implement something like this modular addition and multiplication in opcodes there? And I said, yeah, that would be amazing. Like if you do that, then 1,000 of those operations become trivial.
Why don't we have a multiplication opcode? That feels like something that could be really helpful.
I agree. That's another of the. So Satoshi introduced also multiplication,
but he removed it.
Removed, but yeah, I think.
Do you think what in your opinion, would have a greater attack surface, a multiplication opcode or opcat?
None of them have attack surfaces. It's like,
really?
These are trivial things. There's no...
This is a barely problem.
Yeah. And, even to be honest, within those who are, let's say, against OpCat, it's not because of the complexity and security of CAT. No one is saying that. The real concern, which is a valid concern and requires research, but ultimately it will require a leap of faith of sorts, is... you'll be changing the system, allowing L2s, allowing more economic activity. So there are things called MEVL, minor extraction value that is evil. Will this completely be the demise of Bitcoin? Now, these are serious concerns. I was just talking to a core developer, I'm not going to mention names.
This is a criticism. We won't mention a human being.
No, I'm saying that the point the point I'm trying to make is that I am all for doing research and trying to understand like the impact of something like a cat. But ultimately it is a change that we don't know what its consequences will be.
Right. It'll be a big change. I mean, Bitcoin as a network will be facelifted in many ways.
Yes. But I'm really, really worried that if we don't have changes, we are going to be going further down the ossification route that we're already heading there. And Bitcoin will, God forbid, turn out to be yet another asset, a Rolex for rich people.
The only L2 will be BlackRock ETFs. Exactly.
We're heading there. We're heading there.
You're preaching to the choir.
I know. Yeah. And to me, it's like, it's a no-brainer. Like people are quibbling about, how will we solve these things, which will, yes, there will be, if you go the other route, yes, there will be issues. But what you want is the liveness of the developer community and the ability to change things. Right now, you're heading straight to BlackRock.
People are thinking about the uncertainties of what happens if we take an action, and I think they're underestimating the uncertainties of what happens if we don't.
Yeah,
right? And
you're right, 100%.
I mean, this is something Robin Linus has spoken about at depth. Giannis, the Bitcoin Layers folks, who are familiar with them, have spoken at
and we're heading down that route. We're staring at it. We see it, like with every day that passes, more and more embrace of huge financial institutions and these things. This is not what Satoshi wanted. It's not this asset class that only the the super rich have direct access to, and everyone else gets through an ETF. That's horrible. That is the end state.
If we can't scale Bitcoin in a trustless way, it threatens permissionlessness fundamentally.
Yes.
And then it's like, what's the point? Like, what is the point?
Exactly. There is no point. It will become yet another asset for rich people who I didn't come for this. I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
I don't care about that.
I'm with you. Yeah. I mean, you have some advocates in that camp. And I'm certainly one of them. Speaking of Robin Linus, actually, the one thing that I also wanted to ask was, do you think in the absence, I mean, let's just say you said OpCat might not happen, right? You're not necessarily super bullish that OpCat happens soon or ever. If that is the case, could BitVM potentially be a backup plan here? Or is that, not
We'll
feasible?
explore that. We'll explore that, and we signed a partnership with Alpen Labs, and we'll be using BitVM, the same BitVM bridge that they are. So
Amazing. Okay.
deploying it, both to the Alpen system.
So you're hedging the BitVM. You've got this.
I want to support. I want to explore. I will leave no rock unturned on the path to scaling Bitcoin in the way that is the most self-custodial, the most empowering to individuals. To me, if you don't get true decentralization, true self-ownership, then this whole thing is meaningless.
People.
Yes, exactly. This whole thing is meaningless. You've gone nowhere. And people who don't see this, I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about that.
I want to shake them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I worry and I care about Bitcoin passionately as well. But if we're not the path that says no changes, we're seeing where it leads. It's leading there. It's leading to a path where it is another asset for the rich, another Rolex, another, I don't know what, Picasso or whatever it is. I don't want that. It's
so interesting because the people who are kind of like fighting against this, right, or who are the most resistant to these kinds of changes, they tend to be very, crypto anarchistic and very concerned with things like self-custody. Why do you think they're not seeing this, what we're seeing?
Okay, here's, I think, something that is a sad reality, but it is a reality, right? The lack of proper governance or, the state of governance.
Centralized governance, yeah.
But it could also be decentralized. But I mean, democracies are some sort of decentralized governance. But the lack of even
a system.
Exactly. There is no constitution. There is no protocol. Exactly. So it has led to this certain dynamic where I think everyone is looking up to developers to lead the way. Now, the problem is, and I think it is a problem. I love developers, half of my team are developers and they're way smarter than me. But there's a reason why good systems are not led by engineers. It's a little bit like, the legal department. An engineer is someone who should be very, very risk averse and should be someone who is very good at pointing out all the pros and cons of any particular decision you're going to make. But when you talk about an economic, financial system, an infrastructure like Bitcoin, is it really the right way to have the leadership in the hands of very, very secure and risk-averse mindsets? I mean, you certainly want their input, but I mean, would you take whatever financial economic system it is, or even social system or system that is of great importance to society, would you give it to a very legally set lawyer to be, or the legal team to be the ones managing it? You would probably take politician, business people who are comfortable saying, okay, we heard the pros and cons. We don't actually know what's going to happen, but here's a decision. And I just think that we're on this dynamic that, I mean, I'm viewing it. If this is what Bitcoin, has decided that must happen, I will embrace it, but I'm really worried.
Do you think that there's a solution for the fundamental governance challenges that we're facing?
I don't know. Because it's very tricky because it's actually very tricky because the lack of governance is actually also, there's a pro there, right?
There's benefits, yeah.
Yeah, because any system of governance could be then taken over.
Right.
But, the same thing could happen with a non-governance, right? That is also some default, could still be controlled or lead to some path that is...
There's risks in every direction.
Yes.
It's just, the risk management
But realistically, I don't know how to, change I don't know how, no one probably has any authority to offer a constitution or a due process for Bitcoin governance.
Well,
no
the
one.
more I learn about Bitcoin governance and even just like really simple things like, how many people are actually pressing buttons on Bitcoin Core and this kind of thing, it's amazing thinking about, wait, is this how it's going to work in a hyper Bitcoinized world when the entire financial system depends on this group of like 17 like grant funded developers? Like, what is happening right now?
It is problematic, right?
It's concerning.
It's concerning, but I don't know how to,
But what's the solution? I mean, yeah, I have no idea. It's bizarre.
I would even say, who has a mandate to offer a solution? Like, suppose, there's, there's so many governance models out there and so many brilliant people who could offer, let's say, constitutions or due processes. But does anyone have the mandate for that? Does anyone have the moral authority? Will anyone I think anyone who tries to take the first step will be like stoned and, and like, yeah. So I don't know.
Exactly. Well, it sounds like, again, as sort of on the builder and developer side, all you can do is do the best with the tools that you have at your disposal.
Yeah. We'll try to advocate, convince.
I'm getting a little bit more bullish on BitVM. I know Liam from Alpin Labs is working on some, he was telling me last night, is working on some sort of adaptations of BitVM that will substantially, make it substantially more efficient. Which,
that would be amazing.
Who knows? Wouldn't that be amazing? Maybe the unlock will happen with or without a soft fork. But regardless, it sounds like soft forks at some point we're going to need no matter what, even just like on something like quantum. I've been working on that problem with Interbeast, BIP360 quite a bit.
Nice.
At some point we need to be able to have a system for soft forking, and this is a big challenge. So
maybe the quantum, for a variety of reasons, I hope the quantum computers become a thing as soon as possible because ZK Starks are actually post-quantum secure. But
Bitcoin's not.
Yeah.
What happens?
Then I think it will just be, that would be actually good because then I think Bitcoin will be forced, like all parties involved understand that either this whole thing goes to zero or we need to change, right? Because if you don't make any changes and quantum computers arise, then
it'll be a bloodbath.
Yeah, like you cannot all Bitcoins can be confiscated, certainly the early ones.
Yeah.
So you need to move to some other
you need to fork, basically.
Yes, you need to fork. It might even be a hard
to make
fork.
Changes.
Yes. And in that case, I'm sure that whatever change would also because like ZK Starks are one of the simplest and most battle-proven technologies to actually give you post-quantum secure signatures.
That is also something that I think. So Hunter Beast, who authored BIP360, is now brought on Ethan Haleman, actually, to help him co-author BIP360. And I think that there are some ways that they'd like to use either SNARKs or Starks. I forget which.
Definitely Starks.
Okay, Starks.
Because the SNARKs are not, as I said, they are actually post-quantum susceptible.
Starks are post-quantum, but SNARKs are not.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay, noted. Okay,
yeah.
Starks.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Well, this was so fun. Thank you so much for coming. I had a blast. Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.